You are now listening to the House by the Video Store podcast.
There's no more room in hell. The dead will walk near.
We have such sights to show you.
I kick ass for the Lord.
Praise God, boy.
Welcome to the House by the Video Store podcast. I'm your host, William. Joining me today will be Derek.
Hello.
And that'll be it since Sean is on vacation this week. And we'll be talking about The Crow, the seminal film from the 90s for people that liked the wrestler Sting. And, I mean, Sting pretty much lifted his look pretty much wholesale from that movie.
Yeah.
With the face paint and the trench coat and the all-black clothing. I mean, like, looking at some of these images from The Crow, like, it looks like Sting.
Yeah, Sting definitely took a lot of liberties with that one on the Crow look.
And The Crow is from 1994, directed by Alex Proyas, who has also directed Dark City. So did you see that?
I probably have. The name sounds real familiar.
It's the one with Kiefer Sutherland, and there's like the creatures, like the kind of Hellraiser-looking people that are going around the town and resetting everybody's reality and stuff.
Yeah,
It came out around the same time as The Matrix and was, all the dark drab colors and very stylistic and very much pushed a style for that era. So The Crow is kind of a similar stylistic movie. And then he also directed I, Robot, which I would say is not all that similar to those other two movies, and Gods of Egypt, which is
that's the white people movie that got critically panned.
Yeah, with Gerard Butler and dude from Game of Thrones. I'm forgetting his name off the top of my head. Let's see, what else did he direct? So, Knowing, he directed that Nicolas Cage movie.
No, see, that was a good movie because Nicolas Cage is like full crazy in that movie.
Yeah,
And I think Zoe Deschanel's in that too, and they're just a weird movie.
yeah. So we'll be talking about The Crow here in a minute, but before that, we can go through some recent news and things we've been watching. So there's been yet another trailer released for The Predator. Have you watched that one?
Yeah, I saw it today, and I saw the new poster they released for it. And everything they continue to release just makes you more excited for that movie. Because, we kind of talked about it at first. I think Sean was, pretty, lukewarm on the first trailer. And I think a lot of people were, too. So there was, a fan outrage, or not outrage, but outcry. It was, not enough for whatever they wanted to see. And the kid was in there. And then there's all the stuff they released since, just more and more what you wanted to see.
Well, I think people are still unhappy with it, saying, why do you have a character because I didn't actually watch the trailer, because once you get past the teaser trailers, they're under a minute long. I kind of stop watching them for most things. I know I'm going to watch anyway.
Yeah.
But I've still seen people outcrying oh, there's a comedic character in this movie. It's terrible. It's well, the first movie had a character that was in there for comedic effect, which was Shane Black's character, who's the director of this one. So, and then the second one, you had Bill Paxton being kind of comedic, and then the Want Some Candy. So,
yeah, there's always a little bit of comedy in there in them, and it wasn't comedic at the time, but when you go back and you rewatch the handshake, that's almost comedic now because it's so ridiculous and over the top, and everybody's super muscular and oiled down the entire movie, and Jesse Ventura's got the if it bleeds we can kill all that stuff at the time wasn't funny, but now it kind of is when you go back and watch it. So I have no problem with comedy because I feel like almost every type of movie like this has to have a comedic character in it, or just it's too serious and it's it just takes itself way too seriously.
Well, I think a lot of people think that the second you have a comedic relief character in a movie like this, it's oh, you're just going for a big family-pleasing blockbuster, so it's going to be garbage. I mean, the movie's rated R, so it's not going for the, family, small child crowd. But, I mean, if you watch, Shane Black's, is it Nice Guys? The Nice Guys, the Ryan Gosling, Russell Crowe movie, I'll trust what he's going to do with this one. I give him the benefit of the doubt.
Yeah, well, even you look what he did with Iron Man 3, I thought that was really good. And, people worry about the comedy stuff in the rated R film. It's Deadpool just made $700 million in a sequel that is mostly comedy, so it's like, that's fine,
Yeah.
And it might be they might literally shown the only comedic like part of the entire movie in the trailer. So I don't think it's a big deal.
Yeah, I mean, we'll see when it comes out. I mean, I think we're all excited for it, just, trusting Shane Black. A lot of people have just, in the comment sections have talked about how it's bad. Like, the comment sections for anything are so terrible these days because everybody hates everything. And
this is on topic. If you look at anything for The Crow, it was the best movie ever made. So it's funny how fandom is because, if it's not what you want, then there's just this huge outcry. And then something like The Crow, which it's like you go read some of that stuff and you're like,
well, I think
you just hard to understand that there's like such a huge, like probably small group of people, but just like a large number of people that like love that movie.
Well, I think what happened is you have the fandoms that were created and existed pretty much before the internet became an important part of culture and what it is today. And you have the stuff that comes out now. So The Crow was something that came out and had its own kind of cult following and built from there, and was a movie that very much influenced a lot of style and people who are into certain types of music and certain things like that. It was a huge influence to like a certain section of people. So they forever have that attachment to the property and love it. And it came out before the internet era. So it's mostly all these people who are already fans of it coming to it and talking about it, as opposed to new things that are coming out now. Everybody has an opinion about it because it's terrible and it's the worst everything.
Yeah.
So it feels like a lot of things now, they come out in the era of the internet and they get shat on by everyone, as opposed to things that came out pre-internet era have their fandom who is mostly saying positive things. And people will talk about things they don't like, but it seems just a lot of stuff these days. It's really hard for anybody to agree on anything.
Well, I feel like this is the perfect segue into the fan-made film that they want to read, or the fan-made reshoot or remake of The Last Jedi, which they went $200 million to make. So they want to get $200 million, and then, which I think was pretty close to the actual budget of that movie anyway. So they essentially went the budget again to remake the movie. I don't know who would be acting in it or who would be doing it, but I just love that, like, there's this group of, and there's probably some women, but I think mostly men, that like really want to remake this movie. And are you familiar with like season 8 of Portlandia whatsoever?
Is that the last one or the newest one?
Yeah.
I have not watched that yet.
I can't remember. In season 7 or 8, they have like two guys that make the man movement, and they have a song that's like, "What About Men?" And I feel like whoever it is that wants to do the fan remake is like those people, because it's so ridiculous that they want $200 million to make a remake, and it's like, really, like, just imagine. I mean, a part of me almost wants them to get the money just so I can watch what it is.
Yeah, just to see what they do.
Yeah, it's like, do they want like Luke Skywalker to? I'm trying to think of somebody he could run into and they could recreate the Arnold Schwarzenegger Carl Weathers arm shake from Predator and then go destroy the Empire. I don't know what they want, but I'm thinking that's kind of where they're going with it.
Well,
they just
because I think
the most ridiculous stuff ever. I don't know,
because I think you can dislike that movie, The Last Jedi, and not be a misogynist and all these different things. Because there are people who have legitimate gripes with it. Like I have gripes with it. And then there are some people who simply say, oh, there were too many female characters, or, just kind of things like that. Or because was the actress that played Rose has gotten so much online harassment that she eventually shut down her Instagram account. It's like, I don't really care what people think about movies. It's not really cool to attack people personally.
Yeah, it's that. Especially, I don't know. I just think that at that point, it's like, you probably want to get.
So, like, if somebody has a bad experience with their cable TV provider, let's just say it's Time Warner or whoever, do they then just, want to find a person who works at Time Warner and harass them in their personal life constantly?
Yeah, like they call and it just has to be somebody named Stacy, so they find out who she is and just ruin her life. It's like, she had nothing to do with your shitty service.
I mean, like,
they're just doing their job.
Granted, like, the actress is actually the one that's on screen portraying things, but they're doing a job and getting money for it, and it's part of their career. you shouldn't go and, like, if anything, just go after the creators. Oh, don't go after anybody, but you complain about the creative direction, but just harassing people who are doing their job seems a bit out there. But I mean, I don't think anybody, the rights issues alone to do something like that would be so ridiculous. I don't see it happening. I don't see Disney sanctioning something like that happening.
Because if they did that, then that just, first of all, like the $200 million is just what I love. Because like I would love for them to give me $2 million to remake a Star Wars movie, because about $1 million of it to go toward the remake. Keep the rest, you know.
Yeah,
it's like I don't know what they're. I don't know even know if that's a real goal that they have. It's like part of me would love to see the remake, just to know like what they would do with it. But it'd be like, you know, it'd be unwatchable and just trash.
Yeah, because fan films aren't exactly the easiest thing to pull off when you have a talented crew and writers and things like that, and it's a property that's kind of under the radar. But it's something that'd be as, you know, if they actually had like a decent budget for it, like all that would just make it such a huge thing. There's almost no way it could turn out to be good. Just because you need, you know, regardless of what you think of a lot of movies, if you have a specific creator's vision and it's executed, you know, you may not like it, but that is different than kind of a hodgepodge of people trying to right a wrong with fandoms. And I mean, because like in the past, people just wrote fan fiction for things, and they didn't try to wholesale just say, oh, let's recreate this entire series and make this character a female or make this character a male. Like, they didn't typically want $200 million to do that. But like, as I saw something earlier, I think it was Dread Central posted something about, you know, is It Follows really good? And, you know, it's a kind of clickbait stuff. And of course the comments are, oh, it's the worst piece of shit I've ever seen in my life. XYZ, this, that. And like, for one, I don't see them make a watch that and say it's the worst movie they've ever seen in their life.
Yeah, I don't
and I get people not liking it because there's stuff that's been kind of critically lauded or talked about that I wasn't a huge fan of. But just a lot of the complaints people have against it are just kind of out there. And it's like, really? That's really what that's the hill you're gonna die on? Is that it did this one specific thing? And, you know, that movie wasn't all about sex and blood. I mean, there were characters that engaged in sex in the movie, but it really wasn't shown in any great level of detail, and there wasn't just TNA. And even though there was a little bit of gore at the beginning, throughout there mostly wasn't. So it's just the stuff that people look for in all these movies is very confusing to me. But we live in a culture where nothing can be good. Anytime somebody says, oh, that's really good, somebody has to say, well, actually, it's not. Here's why.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm guilty of that sometimes myself, but...
Yeah. I think that's what makes something like The Crow interesting, is just because, like, you know, with the... Well, I think one of the reasons why we covered it is because of the Jason Momoa stuff, or however you say his name, they released, where they ended up not doing the... You know, they're going to do a reboot or remake of it. Like, that kind of brought it in the conversation again, and there's people that, like, loved it, and then you have, like, the original Crow people who, like, hated it. And anything that's not, like... This is funny because I was reading some stuff where it's like, it's the perfect film, and it's like... Well, I don't know about that, but you know, you're entitled to your opinion. But it's just funny seeing, like, you wouldn't think that a movie like this, like The Crow, would have the same, like, would get as people as upset as like something like Star Wars. But there are those people that just really love it.
Yeah, I mean, it's just what your specific focus is. I guess before getting into the movie real quick, if there's anything we've been watching, I watched some of Luke Cage season 2. It's on Netflix now. Finding it to be enjoyable enough. I'm enjoying it about as much as the first season so far. It has a main villain that's a little bit less outlandish than the first season had. And it's on, I haven't finished it yet, so I don't have a full conclusion. But that was because I also was doing different things over the, you know, past few weeks or so I didn't have time to watch that much. But I did watch some of Luke Cage season 2 because it showed up on Netflix. I was like, oh, okay, I'll watch that. Oh, I also saw Ocean's 8, the Ocean spinoff movie with Danny Ocean's sister, so the sister of the character played by George Clooney. So, okay, so it exists in the same world as those movies. Like, those movies have happened. Yes. It is it's not a direct sequel to those other movies, but it does take place in that universe after those movies. So it just takes place in that universe, yeah. So, you know, enjoyable enough. I thought that it was a fine kind of heist caper movie. Not that I think anybody really cares about the legacy of the original Ocean movies, but this really doesn't shit on that legacy at all or have anything to do really. I mean, without spoiling it, like there are some things that kind of have me scratching my head and wondering if they'll revisit, but the overall, like it's an Oceans movie. I'm pretty sure they called it Oceans 8 simply so they could make Oceans 8, 9, and 10 and then not have it cross over with the same like Oceans 11 being in the title. It's doing pretty well at the box office, so that could be a possibility. Like I said, it was just like I thought it was a decent heist movie. Once you sit there and you think about it after the fact, there's a ton of plot holes, as most of those movies tend to have.
Yeah.
When I was sitting there watching it, I wasn't really bored. I was entertained by it, and I liked the performances and thought it was pretty cool. It's just the style was very much just aping that Steven Soderbergh Ocean's 11 style. And it was very clear. It's like, I guess that's kind of like a staple of the series, but it also just felt like a cover band kind of.
Yeah.
And, I think the acting was good. I just think that the script and the directing were kind of holding it back a little bit. Like, I'm interested to see more movies with those characters in it, but I don't think that it is a standout must-see.
Well, I would think, too, like, given not that, the Oceans franchise carries, like, the same weight as Ghostbusters. But, you look at like what happened when they did the all-female cast of Ghostbusters Outcry. So I wonder if they were a little reserved on the movie for that or if that just played nothing into it whatsoever. But I just think there had to be something there because there's such a, outlash about that, which really actually hurt that movie, which at the end of the day wasn't a bad movie. It wasn't a great movie.
Yeah.
But like Ghostbusters wasn't that bad, but it didn't do anywhere near what it probably should have because of the fan outlash.
Yeah, I think with this one, the fans weren't really that upset about anything. And, the Oceans movies, people may have liked them and it may have been a huge influence on them stylistically, but I don't think anybody's sitting there holding them as, the golden standard of what everything cinema can be and what defined their childhood, because those are more of adult movies. So I just think that franchises like that, like they could have just made this movie without those connections whatsoever, and I think it would have actually been better for it. But I get the name recognition, but how many people who are, because the movie's PG-13, I think, so how many people who were 14 even know what Ocean's 11 was or remember it?
When was the last time one of those movies came out? It had to be like mid-2000s.
I think it was 2007. So when I was, that's over 10 years ago.
11. Yeah, usually talking over a decade ago was the last time one of those movies came out. So there being a connection there doesn't really matter because some people will go see it for certain people in the movie, like when Rihanna in it. So some people might just go see it for that, or there's that to me looks like a movie like which is what something I would like to watch.
Yeah,
but
let's see, because Ocean's 11 was 2001, 12 was 2004, 13 was 2007. So it's 11 years later. I think they think that it would have been better off just not having any of those connections to the original series and just being its own complete thing. But overall, an enjoyable enough movie. Not anything that's great. It's one of those movies that I saw because we have the movie pass, so it didn't cost me anything out of pocket to see it. Otherwise, I would say it's probably a good movie to catch on streaming or one of those platforms if you haven't seen it yet. But I think that was really all the stuff I had a chance to watch. So did you watch anything?
The only two things I want to talk about that I've watched is it's on Netflix, I believe. Netflix, Amazon, I can't remember. I watched Wind River, which has Hawkeye and Scarlet Witch in it.
Yeah.
Jeremy Renner and Ashley Olsen. Have you seen that?
Yes, I saw that a while back, and I enjoyed it a lot.
It was one of those movies where it looked really interesting in the theaters. I didn't go and watch it, but then it just happened to be on there, and it was probably one of the best movies I've watched in quite a while. Something that I think it draws comparisons to me when I watched it, similar was like No Country for Old Men. They're a lot different, but it just kind of felt like if you told me it was a Coen Brothers film, I would have believed it.
Oh, it was Elizabeth Olsen.
Elizabeth Olsen, sorry, not Ashley Olsen.
Yeah, but it does kind of that vibe.
Yeah. Because it's kind of just, it feels very much like a Coen Brothers-esque movie, and that's what I really liked about it. And after watching that, I've really going to go see Sicario now, because I know the same guy wrote and directed that, or at least wrote that. Yeah,
so the same as Tyler Sheridan. So he also wrote Hell or High Water and Sicario. So Sicario, Hell or High Water, and Wind River are a good triple bill if you want to watch those, because they're all really good adult movies that have I wouldn't say. I would say more Hell or High Water and Wind River. I don't know. They're necessarily Coen Brothers-esque with like the quirky directing style, but the universe building and the type of story they're telling is more in line with that.
Yeah, you don't get a lot of stuff like this because like there was action in it, but the interesting parts weren't necessarily the action. It was just the character development and the plot and to see what actually happened and
finding out what actually happened.
Yeah, and you don't get a whole lot of movies like that, especially because this one's more of like almost a true crime movie in a sense. It's funny because I think this came out at the same time as around the same time as The Snowman with Michael Fassbender, and the guy. Do you know anything about that movie? Like how terrible it was, and like what the guy's name was in the movie, and
to think too, the director said they didn't even shoot the entire script, so it was just like part of a movie that they hatchet jobbed into a finished product that got very poor reviews.
Yeah. And they're both in the snow and stuff, so I always think of that movie when I think of this movie, even though Wind River is much much better. The other thing I watched, just going to talk about briefly, is finished season 8 of Portlandia, which hit Netflix a couple weeks ago in June. Which I would say, overall as a series, like for me, it's up there with like Arrested Development, Parks and Rec, The Office, stuff like that. Because I think it's probably one of the, just in my opinion, one of the best TV shows. I think every now and then you hit like season 6 and 7. There's a couple episodes that are hit and miss, but I think what I really liked about the series as a whole, and it kind of went by the Netflix formula, which is it only did 10 episode seasons. And, I think the longest episode was like an extended cut episode, which is like a little over 30 minutes. So most of them are like 20 minutes long. So I think, when you get shows like that, they don't run its course. And it is kind of refreshing because I only saw there's like 80 episodes maybe in the entire series. Like, it doesn't seem right. But I think there is something to that when you keep it a little short and sweeter than, doing like a regular sitcom where you have like almost 24 or more episodes in a season.
Yeah, I think like 22 is a lot of times the standard, but then they vary.
Yeah, which I think sometimes you might get more out of a little bit less, and Cal McLaughlin as the mayor was like awesome throughout it. And there's just a bunch of, especially like being in Louisville and, having the Highlands like we do, it's just funny watching that and you can see some of those people in there.
Well, I mean, because I've been to Portland and I did see a lot of things that reminded me of that show. I mean, in addition to seeing like landmarks or things like that, just like actual shops or stores I had been into or people are into reminded me of that a lot. But a lot of that also holds true for the Highlands area in Louisville. And there's a lot of cities have their kind of, to not sound like a douche, their quote unquote hip, like urban corridor area that is kind of Portland-esque. Yeah.
Yeah, that's all I had watched, so.
All right, so moving into our discussion of The Crow then, the 1994 movie directed by Alex Proyas. Now, there's been, we're talking about the original Crow, and we'll do full spoilers throughout. We're not talking about any of the sequels, because there have been a number of sequels to it. Most of them are direct-to-video, because I think Eddie Furlong was in one of them. Kristen Dunst was in one of them. There's just been a number of those kind of direct-to-video or super kind of under-the-radar sequels that, let's see, there's one in 2000, 2005. I'm trying to remember all the one, Crow, City of Angels. I think I did see that one because they did make a number of sequels. Dave Boreanaz was in one of them. But I think it's a series where it really got hurt by the fact that Brandon Lee passed away.
Yeah, during the filming of the movie.
Oh, let's see. Thomas Jane was in the Crow City of Angels sequel.
Yeah, it's funny because you have like named actors in those movies that came out in the later ones. I think a lot of this movie too, like, is kind of like I don't really think a morbid curiosity is the right phrase for it, but given its history of like Brandon Lee dying during the filming of the movie, I think adds a little bit to it because, there's a lot of conspiracy out there and all that on him. And it's something I think this kind of adds to something to the movie.
Well, yeah,
I don't. don't know what it really adds to it because it's something that is just kind of not many movies have the lead actor get killed during like a routine, really like a routine stunt now. You know,
where somebody didn't clear the barrel of debris and shrapnel or something. Yeah, because
and it's like one of those weird freak things that like everything lined up perfectly for it to happen, and but I do think that's maybe why this movie is kind of stayed relevant for maybe longer than it would have if that hadn't have happened, and maybe it would have stayed relevant longer if he had been around to do sequels. You never really know.
Yeah, I mean, well, too, the way it kind of ended was, like I said, full spoilers throughout. So the way it ended was the character of Eric or the Crow kind of, dying or passing away or going back to the other side. And I guess, too, just the basic synopsis. A man brutally murdered comes back to life as an undead avenger of his and his fiance's murder. So they get killed. He comes back through the power of the Crow and goes on a revenge mission against everyone that was involved in their killing. And two, so last year at Days of the Dead, so the one in Louisville in 2017, they had a panel for the Crow where Ernie Hudson, Tony Todd, Bai Ling, was it Rochelle Davis? I'm trying to remember who else was there. So there's a number of people there from the Crow. And I'm trying to remember. I think that the comic writer may have been there too. I really don't remember. They didn't let us film it because some group had exclusive rights to film stuff, so they got like bad camcorder footage real close up. But they had the panel about it, and it just sounded like, after Brandon Lee died, that just changed the entire perception of the project for everybody involved in it. Because you have to imagine, there have been movies recently where stunt people die, because on Deadpool 2, a stunt woman died. And that has to put a huge shadow over the project. Because the people who worked on it, somebody you worked with and appreciated and enjoyed being around and all that stuff dies. That's got to be a huge knock to just everything. And then, just if you knew that person's family or had more involvement with them, just incredibly sad to see somebody die in an accident and, for something where they didn't have to die. But it's not very often that it's the lead character of your movie. Sometimes you have movies where an older actor dies. Because in the Matrix series, the actress that played the Oracle passed away in between movies, so they had to recast and kind of change that stuff up. So there are things like that do happen, but it's not very often that your lead character, who's a younger person, passes away. And especially, too, Brandon Lee being the son of Bruce Lee. So having all of that baggage and things like that, and he wasn't that old because he was born in 65 and died in 93, so he wasn't even 30 when he passed away. Passed away at the age of 28. So it's just incredibly sad. Somebody that could have been a big star and been in a lot of things. Because I think his turn in The Crow, he did a very good job. There wasn't a ton of great fighting in it. I mean, there was some, but it was kind of stereotypical 80s action movie or 90s action movie style
some
fighting.
Of that too probably was just, that's the way like action kind of was at that point. When you go back and you watch a lot of these early 90s, late 80s movies, like even stuff that like, we'll throw Chuck Norris out there, like none of that stuff was like really, it kind of got away from like, I don't want to necessarily say Kung Fu, but you had the fighting movies of the 80s, like 70s, 80s. It kind of got away from that and it got more Hollywoodish, where it was just kind of, I don't know, if you will, the way they fought. And then recently, in the past 10 years or so, you've seen it come a little more back towards a little more gritty and real, whereas this wasn't that.
Yeah, I mean, and two, like I think, you have the character of Eric, who's the Crow, and you have the gang of baddies that killed him, and Ernie Hudson is the cop, and Sarah is the younger girl. But overall, the environment and the style is almost a character all on its own. Because you do have the white face paint with the makeup, which he takes from one of the masks that's on the wall, and then apparently every other person that's the Crow also does that for some reason. But I mean, stylistically, it is hugely influential for a lot of people of that era, music-wise and just clothing-wise and everything. That really wasn't my scene or my style at all. because I do remember people when I was in high school or middle school who were really into the band like Tool, who'd also love this movie. And I remember seeing the movie in the 90s, so I saw it of that era. I don't remember if we ran it on video or what, but I do remember watching this back in that era and enjoying it enough, but it wasn't something that to me was like a huge pillar of my childhood or my adolescence.
For some reason, too, I really feel like this movie would be like a good double bill with Spawn.
Well,
I don't know. I don't know if it's just because it's like the most 90s, because it's like a really 90s movie. And then Spawn, on the other hand, is like also really 90s.
I'd say like a huge difference between these, though, is that The Crow is rated R and skews, darker than the Spawn movie, because Spawn was PG-13, is more of like a wannabe summer tentpole. Yeah. Just Spawn didn't really have the budget to do what it was trying to do and just kind of came off as cheesy. And The Crow, when it came out in theaters in the U.S., made $50 million. So not a terrible gross. The budget was $23 million. But that was back when you still had a video market that can make movies profitable. These days, it's kind of dissipated. But back then, a movie like this, I'm sure, did huge numbers on the rental circuit.
Yeah, and too, like, again, like that morbid curiosity of Brandon Lee dying during the movie when it came out on VHS, that probably a lot of people who didn't see it in theaters probably rented it or purchased it after the fact just to watch it, because it's one of those things where it's like a lot of people, Bruce Lee was huge for so long, so just being his son and having the connections to it, that probably also piqued a lot of interest.
Yeah, I mean, you have the element of that. I mean, it's kind of like with The Dark Knight when Heath Ledger passed away, but that was even different too, though, because that was just he was in the movie, and then after the movie was over, he passed away. It wasn't because of the movie that he did. Yeah. And watching The Crow, like, I did have to wonder at what point in filming he actually passed away, because I was watching the movie, it's like, well, which parts of this are a stunt double or a stand-in? Or
yeah, because I know they recast some of it, because there's no way the movie was finished, and it is kind of, with the makeup and stuff, and they could probably shoot it around it where it might be kind of hard to tell.
Yeah, as long as you have the hair, the wardrobe, and the makeup in place, if you shoot things a little bit wide, it's kind of hard to see detail in someone's face. So I'm assuming that a lot of that was there. And then, too, this movie does have some very bad 90s CGI, because it was the era where people were starting to use that in more projects. So there's like a shot kind of like of a cityscape shot where things are on fire, and just I know it's technology, but it seems like you could do better than that in After Effects. I could probably make something look like that, given some of the material. So it's just a technology thing, and there's a lot of movies that fall victim to that from the mid to late 90s. Because even something I love like Blade 2 has some really wonky CGI in it that they could have been better off just not even trying to use. But in this movie, in The Crow, they don't use it that much. There's only a few shots where I kind of noticed it. But this is a movie where, like, the Crow series in general is something where it feels like the Sin City style that came about years later would work for that. Because it's kind of what part of like the cityscape stuff from this reminded me of. Because it's a city where it always rains, and
like, this is a franchise of a movie. I guess you say franchise, but it's a movie that I could see where the remake would be interesting, because depending on how you did it, like, knowing they had Jason Momoa attached to it, like, I'm not in love with him as an actor. I think he's decent enough, but I mean, I think it could have been interesting, but I just wonder now, since that kind of fell through, if the remake of that's just going to be dead in the water for a while, and if it's going to come back or not.
Well, something that's been talked about for a long time, and it's kind of in the same spot a lot of these franchises are. Trying to think about like Hellraiser. So Hellraiser is something that's had a bunch of direct-to-video sequels that nobody really cared about outside of like the hardcore franchise fans, and it hasn't had a major cultural footprint aside from kind of those that original movie, really, to the general populace and everybody who isn't a aficionado of that franchise. And The Crow similarly seems like the original movie people are aware of and remember, haven't really seen the sequels. So they don't want to do another low budget sequel. They want to do a, proper reboot of the series with the budget and the talent behind it to make it be something that's a mainstream or, big release. And with all of the kind of crappy comics and graphic novels and things been turned into movies, I think there's definitely room for the Crow to exist. But at the same time, like that original movie, I'm not sure what you're going to do to add on to that aside from slightly tweaking the effects.
Yeah, and that's where I think you're kind of get put in a spot with it too. And it's like, like that's where I kind of go back to like somebody like Jason Momoa, like however you say his name. I would almost want somebody more with a martial arts background because it would be kind of interesting to see where they could kind of what they're going for with the original. But then again, I guess at the end of the day, your job is to sell tickets to people, and if you get somebody like him in there, that would probably get a lot of people to buy tickets.
Well, yeah, because he has more of a profile with Aquaman and Game of Thrones and other things he's been in. But then again, like something we get into like Jason Momoa, Arnold Schwarzenegger, The Rock, it's really hard for me to believe a lot of these guys are kind of an everyman or somebody that you can really identify with to any huge degree when they have muscles that are bigger than most people's legs. Their arm is bigger than most people's leg when they, sit down on it. It's like their leg folded, like both sides. Their arm is still bigger than a lot of people's leg.
So this is the guy that got the hell beat out of him. Oh, okay.
So sometimes with those types of characters or Arnold Schwarzenegger playing everyman, he can do it well, and he has before. It's just sometimes it's like, okay, this person would literally need to work out 6 hours a day. There's no way that they are maintaining this physique and holding down a 9 to 5 and not spending all their free time at the gym. So small things like that. But I mean, like, it did seem though, at least like the crew that was into the movie was really into making it good. And when at that Crow panel, they talked about, with the new one, they're trying to make sure that it will be something fans will be proud of. So it does seem like they have tried to make sure that they're achieving a certain level of quality on the project, and just, people are pulling out if they don't think it's going to meet it. So I think it's a lot of times it's good just to not make something versus doing a half-assed version of it that nobody wants.
Yeah, you don't want to have the Jared Leto version of The Crow. It's like, yeah, I don't want that. And, not to say that it wouldn't make money because that version of the Joker wasn't even made money. But in the long haul, I don't think that's the route you want to go.
Yeah, so but to the Crow itself, so the performances and the story in the movie, like Ernie Hudson is reliable as ever, kind of the everyman in this story kind of grounds it a little bit. Then you also have like the kid character that, skateboards and kind of stereotypical of what you thought kids were in the 90s, or at least I think that was kind of what people saw that as at that era. But the Brandon Lee is the lead. I thought he did a good job, and it's really sad that his career got cut short. But then the stories being that Eric and his girlfriend Shelley were murdered and she was raped. Like, it's kind of a dark story.
Yeah,
and I would say a lot of the things that the Crow or Eric did to kill the people back, like, he didn't go far enough, really.
Yeah. You kind of see that, like, in a lot of these revenge movies where it's like you would think that given their ability, they would go a little bit further, and they typically don't. So, that would be the thing I think with a remake they would almost do. Like, you wonder if they would go, I don't know, extra crazy, but...
I think you already have like a series of movies that you have John Wick, that's had the kind of revenge story, Kill Bill, even there's an entire Punisher TV series. So there's all these things that kind of take the revenge story. And two, being from the 90s and that era, having Tony Todd in it as a henchman, like he was in a ton of stuff back then. And so they just have a good cast and memorable people. And it is funny, too, because that panel, Bai Ling was talking about how she didn't really know her lines. She was just repeating what she was told they were, which you can kind of see.
Yeah, that is actually kind of funny. It's like, but, I mean, it's a movie I enjoy. It's something that, I feel like used to come on TV all the time. And I haven't seen it because I don't know what channel it was. It was like TBS or something that I think had the rights to it. So I don't know if it was around Halloween or if this whatever. Remember, they would show like the first like 2 or 3 of them.
Yeah,
like a lot.
And two, like once again, I think the movie, a lot of its draw is the stylization of it and the style that it has. It's very much of an era and of a certain like subculture that's kind of around that. and it's something that I don't think is as prevalent today. But I think that too, it's something where Brandon Lee is a lot of what made that one work and made that one kind of last over time.
Yeah.
And, like I said, having an Ernie Hudson type, so somebody that's kind of just a reliable, stable presence to kind of ground your movie. People compared it at the time to like Batman or Blade Runner because they're both, kind of stylistic movies. And it was a darker movie than those, just in terms of the setting and things like that.
Yeah.
Because like it was a town that always rained. The town was small enough people could kind of get by on foot to see each other. Because did the Crow really drive a car? I think he mostly just ran and walked places.
Yeah, they caught a cab somewhere or something.
Well, and two, it's one of those things where you have kind of like these unrealistic street gangs where somebody's using a samurai sword and there's the group of people around a table and like I don't know how often that type of thing happens in real life. I'd say it's probably more just for movies and comics and things like that.
Like it's probably happened like once in real life, and then that one instance is just giving ideas to all these other things. Because I don't think anybody's carrying this. I don't think any gang in America, a guy's carrying a samurai sword around. If he does, it's the one he bought from some real janky place. So it's going to break.
Yeah, so let's see. So the remake rumors on that movie started around 2008. So that's quite a while. Getting attacked there?
Yeah.
But yeah, there's different people who've been attached to, like Bradley Cooper at one point is attached to it. A bunch of other people. And then there was rumors of Channing Tatum or Ryan Gosling and James McAvoy. So all kinds of people being linked to that. But yeah, just the original one. To me, it's more of the style of it and the era. Because when I watched this, I hadn't watched this in years. When I finally watched this, it's on Amazon Prime if you want to see it, in addition to owning on video or anything like that. But I watched it, and it did very much make me remember like that era in the 90s because you have like a Stone Temple Pilots song in it and like all this.
It's very much a product of its era. Like, I mean, you look at that movie, it's like, it feels kind of like almost Seattle grunge rock movie kind of.
Yeah.
I mean that's what it feels like. It's not Pearl Jam. It's more.
Stone Temple Pilots.
Alice in Chains. That are like Alice in Chains. This is like almost to me like Alice in Chains of the movie. It's like the way it feels. And
apparently in the late 90s, there was a planned sequel that Rob Zombie would have written and directed, but it didn't come to fruition. So you can imagine what that would look like. But yeah, I mean, like the movie itself, I just think that, the action in it is kind of par for the course in that era. But the movie really sells itself on the style of it and the sets and the kind of look that they had for the character, and then Brandon Lee's performance, and then kind of grounding it off of the more, seemingly like working class Ernie Hudson character. So I think that overall it has a lot of elements in place to make an enjoyable enough adaptation, especially for that era, because this is the era when superhero movies or comic book adaptations or anything like that were mostly, you had Batman from Tim Burton that kind of tried to do everything it could to not be like the comics.
Yeah.
You had the kind of goofy, well, not goofy, but the lighter hearted Christopher Reeve's Batman movies, or not Batman, Superman movies that kind of fizzled out with the fourth one. And so this is in that superhero-ish mold when they didn't want to make a, superhero movie with a guy wearing a brightly colored cape doing heroic things. Is more of the kind of anti-hero era. So you had this movie in 1994, then a few years later you have Blade. So I think this is the era where those types of movies thrived, as like The Crow, Blade.
Well, you also, you had Spawn in that time period too.
Yeah, Spawn.
That and Blade.
Yeah, so I think you had the era when people made these kinds of movies that were trying to be the kind of anti-hero stories, because at the time, bright, colorful superhero stories really weren't being made. And it wasn't really until even Spider-Man years later in the early 2000s they did start kind of making
You had X-Men before Spider-Man.
I mean,
came out,
X-Men
but-
still had everybody in black leather and did as much as it could not to play into the comics and the cartoons and stuff.
Yeah, Spider-Man was really the first modern movie where they went all in on the costume and
Yeah,
because
so
they even had the Power Ranger Green Goblin. So.
yeah, but The Crow itself, so like I said, I think that the movie as a whole, the different, the Crow kind of just working his way up the chain of revenge and going after the individuals directly responsible for what happened to him and his girlfriend, and then going to the crime bust that oversaw all of it, with him being the kind of ultimate big bad at the end. Like, all of that was enjoyable enough, but it's kind of familiar territory to a lot of stories. Not necessarily a flaw of the movie, it's just the genre of movie in general, the kind of revenge story. And yeah, because you can watch a lot of stuff and get like the same type of thing. I think just what sets The Crow apart is just the style of it, and the fact that it does veer pretty close to horror, just with the dark imagery and the style of it. So it's not kind of the lighter superhero film. Like, I mean, I guess, like, would you say this is darker than Blade? Equally dark?
I would say it's probably a little darker than Blade because, like, even in Blade, like, I'm gonna say like the Blade character was a little just because Wesley Snipes.
Yeah,
he himself brought a little more, like, I don't want to say charisma, but almost something to it, or wasn't as dark as it would have been with maybe somebody different.
Yeah,
just because it's Wesley Snipes. And if you put somebody else in the role, maybe a little different, but just having Wesley Snipes, just what he brought to it, especially in the first two, maybe not so much the third. It just didn't feel as dark.
I mean, honestly, I think that you talk about like movies you could play this with. I think The Crow and Blade will make a good double bill because they're both kind of 90s anti-hero stories, rated R, aimed at adults, properties that could have been trying to be a little bit more mass market, aimed at kids. But yeah, so I guess we can kind of give what our thoughts on this are as we kind of wrap up our discussion on it. So what would you give this as a score out of 10?
I mean, it's one of those movies I feel like it's hard to rate, because it's something that, it's not that I didn't enjoy it, because I do like the movie. It's just that, it is very 90s, and it's not like cringy 90s, but it is kind of like just so 90s almost that it hurts on some stuff. So I think that alone kind of makes me, and like the 90s aren't something that, even though it's like when I was born, I grew up, like, that's not something I look back fondly on as much. So to me, it almost kind of hurts a little bit. So I mean, like Brandon Lee, like you said, everybody in it was good for the most part, but I'm right about like a 6.5 or a 7 is where I'm at. Because it's something you can watch, and it is kind of, given like the state of the MCU in the way that it is, and one of my critiques of it is it's always so happy-go-lucky and everybody, it would be kind of nice to get something like this again, but the only problem now is you've had, throughout the DC universe, you had Logan and Deadpool, which aren't like this, but they're still the anti-hero, the darker movie, the rated R, the more for adults. So it'd be kind of hard to find where this movie nowadays would fit in, but that has nothing to do. I'm about a 7 on this, 6.5, 7.
Yeah, I mean, I enjoyed this movie because I remember it fondly from when I saw it back in the 90s. Like I said, this wasn't my favorite movie or anything by any stretch. Just because it was, like, stylistically, like, I enjoyed it, but it wasn't anything that necessarily spoke to me. So I do see how a lot of people could come away from this and say, oh, this is one of my favorite movies. It's 9, 10 out of 10. Like, I do get that, how it could be on somebody's wavelength. Yeah. Because there's a lot of stuff that, I really enjoy from that era that may not be from when I was a kid, that may not be the best, but it's just something that spoke to me. And then I owe it, like Evil Dead, like those, like Evil Dead 1 or 2, they're not the best movie of all time. Like, that's the acting in them, everybody was kind of fresh. Bruce Campbell was better in the second movie than the first one, but they had this charm to them that just makes me love those movies and rate them some of my favorite movies. So I totally get people, just the time that you see something and how it hits you, impacting how you enjoy it. But The Crow I still enjoy. Like, I give it an 8. It's something I, haven't watched in a few years. But it was interesting being at that panel where they had, Ernie Hudson and Tony Todd talking about things. And in a room that doesn't have a ton of people, it's easy to forget that, for a while, Ernie Hudson was in the Ghostbusters movies, The Crow. He was in a bunch of big stuff. and he's done, solid supporting work on different shows and movies over the years.
Yeah.
But then at the Days of the Dead, the big expensive photo op was him in the Ghostbusters gear, which, good for him that he can go out and supplement his income that way. And, hopefully it seemed like he was enjoying himself, and he was very talkative, and at those panels he was into, because some people at those panels just kind of seem like they're pains to be there, and they're like, oh, just give me my check, let me go. He at least seemed to be more engaged and happy to talk about things and actually taking questions from fans and stuff. So that was really cool to see. And Tony Todd seems like somebody who's really cool. He's been in so much genre stuff too.
Yeah, I will say something like this that you go back and watch holds up a lot better. I know, like, I'm just thinking of other 90s movies during that time period. Like Blade, I still think holds up. Some stuff in it doesn't. I mean, like, but nothing's going to hold up 100%. You're talking a movie that's,
20 years old.
Yeah, 24 years old now. But, it's not hard to watch. Like Mortal Kombat, the only reason why is because it's Mortal Kombat. If it was any other movie, but it was the exact same thing, I would not watch it.
Oh, yeah. I mean, the Crow holds up way better than Mortal Kombat, in my opinion.
Yeah. Or like, even something like Spawn, even though like we all like Spawn at that point in time, you go back and try to watch Spawn again.
Because we did an episode on that, I think.
Yeah, but I mean, that's a chore. There's not much in Spawn that's good to go back and watch outside of it just being a Spawn movie. I
mean, honestly, the story of the Crow and Spawn aren't all that different.
Yeah,
I mean,
they're pretty similar.
I mean, there's the differences of the symbiote and Hell and Malbolgia and all that stuff. But the difference is, somebody gets killed, they come back for revenge. And that's kind of the basic blueprint for a lot of properties, really, at this point. But yeah, so that's a movie that's very stylistic, very of the time, but still enjoyable. And it's not something that is just a complete fabrication of people's imaginations that it was ever enjoyable. It is enjoyable. It's just, I think it's a movie, if you're in the mood for it, it can, hit a lot better and be a lot more enjoyable. And especially if you're into that back in that era and that was more of your vibe aesthetically. Because there's still people that probably dress like that, right? I would assume.
Well, speaking of Portlandia, there's like a couple characters that have
the
dress like that. Yeah.
Well, I mean, if you go to those horror conventions, people do kind of get decked out in all of their garb. And it's, not my style per se, but I can, understand why people are drawn to certain things. So we'll wrap it up. It's a movie we enjoy. Not like our favorite movies or anything like that, but definitely one from the era that you can go back and watch and still have enjoyment with. Yeah, so if you're listening via iTunes, you can do us a huge favor and leave a review via iTunes. It'll help other people find the podcast. You can find all the work we're doing at housebyvideostore.com. You can find links there to all of our social media accounts: Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, YouTube. And have you seen Instagram TV exists now?
Yeah.
Where it's all vertical video. I'm not sure how I feel about that. Like, we have a channel for House by Video Store, so we might start posting some more stuff out there. So keep an eye out. Make sure to follow us on Instagram, in addition to YouTube. Like I said, you can find everything at housebyvideostore.com. To find us on the internet, you can find me on, I think the best place is just to see me on Instagram at @TheWilliamCaps.
You can find me on Instagram and Twitter at MetalWorldEric.
And that will bring this episode of the House by Video Store podcast to a close. Thanks for listening.